Hello, today we are talking about midpoints. So these are our learning targets on midpoints. We are going to start with our vocabulary, and this is a word that we have not discussed in class yet, but I believe most people know what it is. A midpoint is a point, first of all, it has to be a point, that is exactly in the middle of a segment. Now, if you need more time to write that down, pause the video here to write that. Now, draw a diagram to represent a midpoint and use words to explain your diagram. So to show something as a midpoint, I'm going to start with a segment because midpoint bisects a segment, or it goes to the middle of a segment. So I would put M here for my midpoint. Now to indicate that that's the middle, I somehow need to indicate that this length is equal to this length. In geometry class, we are going to do that with a slash. So each side has a single slash, which means they both have the same length. And if I were to have two slashes here, that would mean I'd have to have two slashes over here. So if there were three slashes again, I'd have to have three slashes on this side. The same number of slashes indicates that the two pieces are equal. Now we also need to use words to explain our diagram. Now to explain it, I probably need to label my endpoints of my segment. So I need to say that M is the midpoint of segment AB, and to write segment AB, I write AB with a segment over top. We could also say that AM, that length, is equal to MB, that length. If I want to talk about congruent, which means they are equal in length and they are the same object, then I would write like this. If you need to pause the video here to write any of that down, please do so. Moving on to segment bisector. Sorry, I had a little screen problem. Segment bisector. A segment bisector is, it could be a point, it doesn't have to be. It could be a line, it doesn't have to be. It could be a segment, it doesn't have to be. Or it could be a ray. So it's any one of these geometric objects, but it must do something very specific. It must go through the midpoint of a segment. If you need more time to write that down, please pause the video here. In their diagram of a segment bisector, I'm going to start the way I had started with my midpoint, and I'm going to start with segment AB. Then I'm going to identify where the midpoint is, but then I know a segment bisector doesn't have to be a point. I'm going to go ahead and make a line that should go through, which I'm not moving very easily, there we go, should go through that midpoint. I'm going to label that M, and again, to indicate that that M is the middle, I'm going to put a single slash on each of those. So in words, what that means is I can label my line L bisects segment AB, and I might want to say through point M, so I know exactly where it is. And again, as I did before, I know that AM is equal to MB, the lengths, and I know that this segment is the same segment from A to M as it is from M to B. If you need to write any of that down, please pause the video here. So number 3, compare midpoint and an endpoint. And you can write in words or you can use a diagram. So what I would like for you to do is I would like you to actually do this. So we're talking about midpoint, which we have already discussed earlier in this lesson. And we're talking about something that you should know, which is an endpoint. And we are talking about a segment. So please pause the video here and complete problem 3. You do this one. Here are the similarities and differences. A midpoint is the point at the middle of a segment, whereas an endpoint is a point at one end of a segment. The similarities are both of these things are points, but the difference is the location on the segment. And there is a diagram to the right showing the midpoint being in the middle and the endpoints beginning and ending the segment. If you need to write some of this down, please pause the video here. Moving on to number 4. If 2 points are graphed, find the coordinates of the midpoint. So the directions would be find M, the midpoint of segment AB. So we're going to write the steps down and we're going to write our final answer in the box provided. So first thing that I'm going to do is just like I did with length. I'm going to count up and I'm going to count over, and I'm going to start at the lower point and I'm going to go to the higher point. Again, write down what you need. You don't need to write all of this down necessarily. At this point, the count up and over is probably enough. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to count my up and I'm going to count my over. And when I count up, I get 4. And when I count over, I got 10. So first step. So what I have is I counted up 4 and I counted over 10. So second step. I'm going to start at the lower point again. And my lower point, I'm going to go ahead and write down what that is, and that is point A. And I'm going to count up and over, but instead of going up 4 and over 10, I'm going to count up and over half as much. So I'm going to count up half, and I'm going to count over half. So let's see what I'm going to count. I'm going to count up 4 divided by 2, which means I'm going to count up 2. And then I'm going to go over half of what I had, which was 10. So that means 10 divided by 2 is 5. So let's do some counting. So I'm going to count up. I'm going to start at A, my lower point. I'm going to count up 2. And then I'm going to count over 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that looks pretty good because I landed on my segment and I put a large point there. Now from here, what I need to do is write my answer down. And I'm going to write my answer as coordinates, which means an x, comma, y. So let's go ahead and do that. Looking back at our grid, I start at the origin. Here's my origin, and I need to figure out how I get to the green point. Well, I go left 1, so that means left 1, and then I went down 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are the coordinates of my midpoint are -1, comma 4. So I'm going to go ahead and actually put my answer in the box provided. So that box is up here. Coordinates of M, the midpoint of segment AB, are -1, comma 4. If you need to pause to write anything down, please do so now. So now we're moving on to the you try, which means you get to do it now. So you are doing this one, and you're finding the midpoint of segment SR. So please pause the video here to find the midpoint of segment SR. Here's the solution to the you try with some of my work. My midpoint is this point that I plotted here in green, and the coordinates of that point are right here. So if this is not correct, please pause the video here to jot down what you can or write down any questions that you have. If you have the you try correct, then we're going to move on to problem 5. Problem 5, if two coordinates are given, find the coordinates of the midpoint. So now the only difference is I'm starting part A without using a graph. So how are we going to find the midpoint if I don't have a graph or if my numbers are too large for the graph? I'm never going to force you into either method. Use whichever method you prefer. Step 1 is we are going to average the x's, which means, what am I going to do? I'm going to take the x's and I'm going to add them together, and then I'm going to divide by 2. So in this case, let's identify our x's. And our x's are 3 and -7. They're the first number in each coordinate. So to do that, I'm going to take 3 plus -7, and I'm going to take that and divide it by 2. 3 plus -7 is -4 divided by 2, and that simplifies to -2. Next, we're going to do the same thing with the y's. We're going to average the y's. So I'm going to take the first y and the second y, add them together, and divide by 2. So we need to identify the y's. The y values are the second numbers in my coordinates. So that is 7 plus -1 divided by 2. And 7 plus a -1 is 6 divided by 2, which is 3. Finally, I need to write the coordinates down. So to write that down, I put the x value first, just right here, and then I'm going to put the y value second, which is right here. And so the coordinates of the midpoint are at -2, 3. If you scroll down, pause the video if you need to write anything down. We can do this also by using the graph. So for using the graph, you'll notice my graph does not have any axes. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to create my axes. So I'm going to draw down my y-axis, and I'm going to draw in my x-axis. From here, I need to plot my points. Now, you can see your points. I can't. A is at 3, 7, and B was at -7, -1. So let's plot some points. A is at 3, 1, 2, 3, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So here's A. And B is at -7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, -1. And there is my B. Please pause the video to complete plotting those if you don't have those. So from here, first step is plot the points. Next step is to count up and over from the lower point to the higher point. And again, write down what you need from this. You probably only need to say that we're counting up and over. That would probably make sense to you at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my line straight up. I'm going to draw my line across, and I'm going to count up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'm going to count over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I counted up 8 and I counted over 10. So the next thing I need to do is I'm going to start at the lower point, and I'm going to count up half and over half. So I want to go up half and over half. So let's figure out what that means in this particular problem. If I am going to go up half, I'm going to go up 8 divided by 2, and half of 8 is 4. And then I need to count over half, over 10 divided by 2, and 10, when you cut that in half, is 5. So I'm going to start at my lower point. I'm going to count up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to count over 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this should be my midpoint, and I need to write down my coordinates. So the coordinates are -2, 1, 2, 3, -2, comma 3. There is a box to enter this. I don't have it on my screen, so I'm going to scroll up, and I'm going to enter the answer into the box, which was -2, comma 3. And I believe we got that both ways. Please pause the video if you need to write anything down from the screen. Please pause the video if you need to write down anything from this screen. At this point, we're moving on to the you try. So this is the one that you are going to do. It does not matter which method you use. Just pick the one you want to do and do the you try 5. So please pause the video here. Here is the solution. Your answer is here in the large green box, and I'll take either way, either 1/2 comma -5 or 0.5 comma -5. If you got that correct, then you just keep the video running. If you did not get that answer, please pause the video here and figure out how to do this question properly or write down some questions. So pause the video now if this is not correct. So we are now moving on to number 6. Number 6 is a little bit different. Everything that we've done up to this point has been the same. If a point and the midpoint are graphed, find the coordinates of the other endpoint. So let's look at this key word here. We are now finding an endpoint. That's my key word. So I'm not doing the same thing. We're going to write down the steps to find the endpoint E, and we know we have segment CD already graphed here. So first thing that I want everybody to do is on the graph, I want everyone to label the midpoint. So I need to read again and identify some key words. So I'm looking right here. Steps to find the endpoint E of segment CE with midpoint D. So I know the midpoint is called D. So I'm going to go to my graph over here. This is my midpoint. Okay, I'm just going to write an M, and I'm going to put a circle around it. You may do whatever it is you like, but that's how I'm going to know that is the middle of my segment. Next thing that I want to do is I want to find the general area for the other endpoint. Okay, so find the general area for the other endpoint. So I know that C is an endpoint. I know that M is the middle. That's the middle, which means my other endpoint should be over here somewhere. So this is where my other endpoint, oh, I'm running out of room. That's where my other endpoint should be, is over there. So that's all we have done right now. So next step, from the endpoint. Now, what's our endpoint called for this problem? If my midpoint was D, then C is an endpoint and E is an endpoint, and graphed, I have C. So from the endpoint, that would be from point C, we are going to count, in this case, down and over to the midpoint. And again, our midpoint in this problem is called D. We've already changed it to an M on our paper. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to count down. Let me put my lines in so I can do this properly. So I count down 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I know that I counted down 3, and I counted over 7. Next step. So I want to start where I ended. So from the midpoint, that's where I ended. I ended on the midpoint. I ended on D when I was counting. So from the midpoint, we're going to count, in this case, down and over again the same amount. Sorry about that. And then we're going to plot that point. And that is going to be my end point. And my end point is called E. Okay, so I counted down 3 and over 7 to get to D, and I'm going to do it again. I'm going to count down 3, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to count over 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'm going to plot the point, and that will be my other end point. If I were to draw this segment in, D would now be the end point of segment CE. So let's write down the coordinates of E. Starting back at the origin, I go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I went over 8 and I went down 5. So that's how I write the coordinates of E. If you need to write something down from the screen, please pause the video here. Moving on to the next thing. This is a you try. So you are going to do this. You are finding the endpoint J of segment FJ with midpoint M. So again, highlight your keywords, start with your diagram, label the midpoint, find the general area, count your up and over or down and over, whichever it is in this case, and write down the point. But please pause the video here to complete you try 6. Here's the solution. J is at 5, -2 in the large green box. If you got that correct, have a wonderful, wonderful evening. If you did not get that correct, see if my work helped you in any way. If this work did not help you, then write down some questions that you have about this problem. Once you've written down some questions or corrected your work, you have a wonderful evening.